Rappin with ReefBum is sponsored by Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Rappin with ReefBum. I'm your host, Keith Berkelhamer. So on today's live stream, I welcome back Bill Bramucci from Epic Aquaculture. What's up there, Bill?
Hey, how you doing, Keith?
So Bill was on the show nearly 2 years ago, and he is the owner of Epic Aquaculture. He is a stickhead like me and specializes in premium, higher-end SPS corals. But before we start our chat with Bill, I want to take care of a little business and thank the sponsors for the show, both Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine. I really appreciate their support, and I also appreciate you folks tuning in. I see a whole bunch of people finding the stream right now. So please spread the word, and as per usual, hit that like button so more people can find the stream. And as normal, I would encourage you folks to drop your questions in the chat. Comments are encouraged, and we love to have an interactive discussion on the live stream here. So, Bill, my first question was how you been doing, but you gave me a call about 20 minutes before the live stream, and you were not a happy camper. And I thought we weren't going to do the stream, man, because what you were describing to me was a reef keeper's, one of the worst nightmares that a reef keeper can have. And I applaud you for wanting to continue to go ahead with the stream tonight and actually talk about what happened with your system. So I mean, listen, you could have just avoided the whole thing and not talked about it. We could have kind of had the conversation as planned in terms of talking about your coral farm and your 460-gallon tank. We will still be talking about that, but man, let's talk about what just happened to you in the last 24 hours with your system.
Sure. So, like you were saying, I had an unfortunate and unnecessary accident with my 460-gallon tank. I had a bit of a phosphate issue in the tank. It had gotten crept up to about 0.16, and in the past I've used phosphate E from Brite to occasionally lower the phosphate quickly, and that's basically a diluted lanthanum chloride product. And for those that don't know, lanthanum chloride is a product that is also used in swimming pools. And basically it binds to the phosphate and creates small particles that get filtered out of, in the case of a swimming pool, it gets filtered out in the pool filter. And in the case of an aquarium, if you use it, you need to run a filter after the area that you drip the lanthanum chloride into so that it filters out those particles. If you don't do that, the particles can get into the gills of fish and cause problems. I was aware of that, but I wasn't aware of how bad the problems can be. And as I said in the past, I used aquarium products for this, and they worked well for me. I didn't have any issues. But I found out both online and from a friend that you could use a product called Sea Clear, which is for pools, to do the same thing. And it is a lanthanum chloride, but it's much stronger than the aquarium products that we use. So basically, I calculated the appropriate dose based on others' experiences, set up my dosing last night to dose the amount that I wanted to lower it to my target range. It started the drip at about 3 p.m. last night, or yesterday I should say. I went to bed at about 11 and everything looked fine. And then this morning when I woke up and looked at the tank at 8 a.m., half of my fish were dead on the bottom of the 460. And so, of course, I panicked. I had no idea what caused it. I thought, you know, is this an equipment failure? Did something get into the water, foreign substance? Did somebody drop something into the water? I absolutely had no clue, but the furthest thing from my mind was that the lanthanum chloride would have been the problem, because I had used lanthanum chloride in the past, not this product, but other products, and it had been successful and caused absolutely no stress that I could see. So then I walked over to one of my frag systems, which I had also dosed, because the phosphate had crept up a little bit in there too. In both cases, the phosphate was not high enough where this was a necessary thing for me to do. I was just trying to keep things in my target range, more for to keep things the same and to keep everything running the way that I normally have it. When I looked into the frag system, I usually keep a few tangs in my frag systems to keep algae at bay and a few other what I call utility fish, and the tangs were on their sides dead. And then it occurred to me, what's the common denominator? Because these are completely separate systems, separate equipment, separate sumps, the whole works, and the common denominator was the lanthanum chloride. And then it was an aha moment. Obviously, first thing I did was get the fish out that had passed, and then started water changes on the tanks. To this point in the day, I've done 120 gallons on the 460-gallon tank. I also fortunately had some 1 micron filter socks available to me, so I put those in the tank to filter out the particles which were causing the issue. And I was helped, but I have lost about half my fish at this point. I'll go through the list real quick just because, as it turns out, and I'll explain this in a minute or two, certain fish are much more susceptible to this issue than others. But the list of fish from the 460 that I lost and the frag system is that I lost a ruby red scooter, a flame wrasse, a regal angel, my male Watanabe angel, my female Watanabe angel, a large sailfin tang, 5 fox faces, a purple tang, 5 yellow tangs, white tooth bristle or white tail bristle tooth tang, a coal tang, hippo tang, and I think that's the total right now. So
you're getting a lot of comments and condolences in the chat. People are just really bummed out about this, Bill.
Yeah, I am too. And I've been fortunate. I've never had anything like this ever happen to me. So this is I guess I kind of feel like I'm still in shock. I really am. It's obviously a very humbling experience. Like I said, as I was talking to you before the stream here, part of it was my hubris. It never occurred to me. Not even in the furthest reaches of my mind did I ever think that I was doing something that was going to harm the animals in my care.
Yeah.
And you know, there are some things that I've done in the past that I knew had some risk, and I knew there's risk with the lanthanum chloride, but I didn't think there was this kind of risk. I just never occurred to me. So this has been just a major shock. I'm pretty numb right now. It's been very sad. I hope that the remaining fish are going to be okay, and to this point they seem to be. They're swimming, they are eating, they seem a little skittish, but overall they seem to be okay. So I'm hoping that the worst is over, but you know, that remains to be seen. But going back, you know, to a little bit of our conversation earlier, I kind of want to. The reason that I wanted to talk about this today, instead of basically avoiding talking about something so painful, is that I think it can help some other people, maybe if they are contemplating using this product or really any product that is something or a piece of equipment that you're going to put into your aquariums, and that's do the research. I did not, to be perfectly honest. I talked to a buddy who doses it. I did a little bit of research on calculating how much I should be dosing, but if I would have just, and I did this after the fact, I Googled, I killed my fish with lanthanum chloride. The very first thing that came up was Richard from Aficionado had almost this exact same scenario happen to him a couple of years ago. If I would have read that article, I would have never put this product in my tank. And he literally did almost the exact same thing that I did, which was he did some research, got his calculation down, set things up for what he thought was the appropriate way to do it, dosed it, and within an hour, problems started occurring, and he lost fish also. Not as many as I lost. Fortunately for him, he saw the problem pretty quickly and was able to start doing some water changes and try to rectify the problem. Mine, it was an extremely slow drip, and I think it reached a tipping point while I was asleep. So I did not see the problems occurring and was only able to react after the fact when a lot of the
I mean, we get so emotionally invested in our tanks and in the animals that we have in our tanks, and like I mentioned to you before the live stream, I had a kind of a similar type of situation in terms of a heavy loss of fish about a year ago on my Peninsula tank. It was a new system, and I was doing some maintenance on a peristaltic dosing pump, and I made the boneheaded mistake of actually having the liquids right below the peristaltic dosing pumps, about 4 feet off the ground. So when I did the maintenance on those pump heads and took the rollers out, that just released all the the pressure in the line, and I was dosing ammonium nitrate. So unbeknownst to me, about 800 mLs of ammonium nitrate got dumped into my sump. I left, went out skiing actually, came back about an hour or two later, walked into the room, and I didn't see the fish out, even though the lights were not on. And I was like, oh, that's odd. And then I sat down at my desk, and all of a sudden I look over the tank, and out of the corner of my eye, I see a fish jumped out of the tank. I was like, whoa, what's going on there? And then I went over to look at the tank, and there was like fish that were just doing, whirly birds and lying on their sides, and it was like, so I was in a panic because, like you, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't, and it's just really, I feel for you right now, because you just feel like you lost a loved one, right? I mean, you're really just, it's really difficult thing to handle, especially when you don't know what's going on. You're trying to like play, all right, I need to solve this problem because things are dying right now. Right. So,
and, with an aquarium, it's kind of you kind of have a little bit of a God complex because you're in control of their fate, and that's what I feel so guilty, because it was an unnecessary mistake, and they're the animals are the ones that suffered, and yeah, it is. You're right. It's very emotional.
It rocks your world. So Rob from upstate New York is saying, so the effect from this was killing oxygen levels. That would be my assumption, right? Or is it
no,
not?
actually,
No?
what it does is the phosphate binds with the lanthanum chloride, and it creates small particles in the water. Those particles they're very small. I'm not exactly sure micron-wise what they are, but generally speaking, I found out that a lot of people use a 10-micron filter where they're dripping the lanthanum chloride into the tank, and that will filter out these particles. If the particles get into the water, they can actually get into the gills of the fish, and it suffocates them. So it's a horribly painful death, I assume also, which makes it even that much worse. So, and that explains also why some fish lived and some fish didn't. The ones that are remaining, you would never know. They're fine, they're eating, they're swimming around. So it's not like if you put a poison in the tank, or if you have ick or something like that, where it's a slow thing and you can address it. It's pretty sudden.
Right.
And so, as far as I know, it's actually a physical ailment, not an actual poisoning or anything like that. So, yeah, that's.
So, I've heard, some reefing friends, say, hey, I'm dripping lanthanum chloride, and I was like, hey, that's not for me. And I've also heard folks on the commercial side of the business, doing it because they have such large systems and they need, a lot of giddy up to get, phosphate out of the systems. What, so you're basically done, never using lanthanum chloride again. I'm assuming, but is this something that reefers should really, really, think twice about doing it, even if they've had success doing it once before?
Well, I think that it's not so much don't ever use it. I could definitely not say, because I think a lot of people have used it successfully to accomplish what they want. What I would say, and what I didn't do, is just do in-depth research on what are the risks, what are the appropriate ways to do it. I set it up what I thought was appropriate, but I'll have to be honest, I was very cavalier about it, because not only had I used the aquarium products with lanthanum chloride in them previously with success, but also because a friend of mine is doing it and has not had any problems. He has similar fish to me, and his display tank is over 300 gallons, so it's a larger tank. I also, know of a lot of other people that have used it successfully. So I wouldn't say don't use it. What I would say is know the risks and make sure that you have it set up so that there's as little possibility of an issue as can be. In my case, I thought I was good. I dripped it before my filter floss. I use filter floss in 7-inch filter cups on this tank. And it was also before my skimmer. So my thinking was the floss will get most of it, the skimmer will get the rest. I shouldn't have a problem. I was clearly wrong. The floss probably didn't take much of, I mean, I'm sure it took some of it out, but not nearly enough. And in hindsight, if I was going to do it, I should have been dripping it into at least a 10 micron filter sock. And since I have them, I have 1 micron filter socks, which aren't easy to find, but I have them. That would have been probably the ideal way to do it. But like you said, once bitten, twice shy.
Yeah.
I have no plans of ever using it again. And ironically, and I mentioned this to you also, when I initially set up the tank, I had an algae turf scrubber on the tank to handle nitrates and phosphates, in addition to my skimmer and other filter media and such. The tank got very efficient at consuming the nitrates and phosphates, so I decided, well, I'm going to take this piece of equipment off, because why use electricity, and just one less thing to have a problem with. So I haven't had the algae turf scrubber on for about a year now, and I had just decided this week that I was going to put it back on, because my nitrates started to creep, or not nitrates, I'm sorry, phosphates started creeping up. So I was going to install it next week, because my wife and I are going out of town this weekend, and I don't make changes right before going out of town. So I planned on putting it on back online next week, and this was more or less just a Band-Aid, to get things back in line before before adding the algae turf scrubber on. So again, my biggest fault on this was assuming that this different product, which was a much different strength than the aquarium products that I used before, would not have much more of a risk than the aquarium products. And I thought I had my calculations correct. In fact, I double-checked it. They were correct for using what other people had done. But obviously, this product was much stronger. And I really can't say why it happened with this product and not the other products, because I dosed them in exactly the same manner before my filter floss and before my skimmer, and didn't have problems. So I really don't know what the difference is, other than I know that the concentration is much higher with this, but I still don't know why, when I did the calculations and double-checked them, why it would have caused this problem, but obviously it did. So hindsight's 20.
Yeah, it is. So some comments from the viewers, Reef Keepers, saying Market Mel is Reef swears by lanthanum. I've heard too many stories of it killing tangs due to clogging their gills. Eric L. Man, that sucks. Had a similar thing happen years ago. Oddly, it killed just tangs in my situation. Again, comment about Mark using it for years without years without issues. Reefaholic said, when I dose sea clear, I dose about 1 ml over 8 hours to 100 grams. That's gallons. That's how potent it is.
Yeah, and my dosage was 1.5 milliliters in a liter of RODI water, and then dripped. It would have taken about 30 hours for it to finish the drip. Only about 500 milliliters had dripped overnight. And then, of course, I took it offline right away at 8 in the morning. So that was over the course of approximately 15 hours. which if you look at other people, that's pretty much in line with what he's saying, going into a 500-gallon total water system. In fact, I did my phosphate test on it. It only lowered it from 0.16 to 0.10. So it got it exactly where I wanted it to get it. You know, so again, it's not so much that I would never say to use it, because, you know, Malieb uses it. A lot of people use it. I know that Andrew Sandler, the gentleman with the 17,000-gallon aquarium, was using it last week because they were out of GFO. But, you know, obviously they've got experience with the products that they're using, and have it set up correctly so that those particles don't get into the water. And I obviously did not. So, you know, it's a live and learn situation, hard lesson, and unfortunately the fish paid the price in my case. And you know, David
Waters is saying, so sorry this happened, but thank you so much for coming on to warn everyone of what can happen. That's for sure. You know, I think it's you know, the positive thing here, Bill, is that you are sharing this very, very painful experience. And you know, I was talking to you about this. It's not easy to talk about the failures, you know, and you know, there's a lot of it's always awesome to share stories about the successes, but the failures really hurt, you know, and livestock loss hurts, and it's tough, you know. It's just like I said before, you're like so emotionally invested in this thing that you know, it just really impacts the psyche. And we're not gonna hold you for too long on the live stream. So whenever you need to you know, go and take care of whatever you need to take care of, you just you let me know. But I think we could also talk about kind of what we intended to talk about, which is your
sure.
your 460. Unless you wanted to mention anything else about what's going on at this point.
One other thing with the lanthanum chloride that I did learn after the fact is that tangs are most susceptible to the issue, and also wrasses. So anybody who's considering it, take that into account if you have a lot of tangs and a lot of wrasses. If I do the count of the, I think 22 or so fish I lost, 1, 2, 7, 8, 9, 10 of them were tangs, 5 of them were fox faces, and several angels, 3 angels. So they were, a lot of them were larger fish. And I learned after the fact that, like I said, tangs in particular and wrasses are most susceptible to this issue. And again, had I known that, I probably would have, you know, thought twice about doing what I did. So
yeah.
You know.
Well, you know, like you said, you know, hindsight's 20/20. It's kind of tough to rewind the clock, but you know, again, sharing this experience will potentially prevent others from making, you know, having the same situation happen to them. So that is the plus that,
right,
you know, that's coming out of this. All right, man. So you sent me a video of your 460, and I don't know, is it going to be too painful to play that video if there's some fish in there that are? We don't have to play the video.
Oh, no. I'd like you to play it because I think a lot of people are interested in how the tank looks today compared to how it looked 2 years ago. Unfortunately, a lot of these fish are not with me anymore. This video I actually took yesterday, so only about 24 hours ago. But I think it shows, you know, where, barring my huge mistake, where the tank has come to. And you know, I'll recover. But I think it's a good video showing, you know, where the tank has come over the last 2 years now. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, you basically were starting this system up when we last spoke on the live stream, right? A couple of years ago, this tank was just being set up.
Yeah, I actually went back and watched that live stream, and it was kind of interesting to see, you know, where it was at that point and where it is now. It's basically where I wanted it to be in terms of, you know, I finished the construction on the wall and how everything is set up. Obviously, it had all the fish in there, and the live rock is all in there now, and lots of corals that for the most part have done real well for me. So overall it's been a very successful tank, and you know, prior to today's events, I had been very happy with where it had gotten to. So
refresh our memories in terms of the setup, in terms of the equipment, the lighting, and all that stuff.
Sure. Well, the tank itself is a 460-gallon tank. It's 7 feet long by 42 inches wide by 30 inches high. It's set up in a peninsula, but it's also in a wall. So basically, it can be viewed as an in-wall tank, just like you see a lot of people's tanks. But if you open the door and go into the fish room, it kind of becomes a peninsula tank where you can walk around 3 sides of it and get the long view as well as the back view. So when we have guests over, I put up a background on the tank so that you don't see the equipment and some of my grow out tanks and such, which you can see, and you'll see in the video. You can see right through the tank and see those, and you can see wires running there and equipment and such. So it looks a little bit nicer when we have company over to have the background up. But for me personally, I like to have the background down because I think, you know, I can see my equipment through the tank, and I don't even have to go into the room to see if there's an alarm or something like that. But and it still looks nice with the background down, but it's also nice to be able to see all the way around the tank. And I have corals mounted, you know, on the back side as well as the front side. So there's a lot going on in there. The aquascape was all from dry rock. I used E-Marco to glue it together in 3 large pieces that I put into the tank. And then I've added to it since then because I always run out of room for corals, so I'll glue another rock on that I can put a... Yep. So when you first glance at the tank, it looks like there's a ton of live rock in there. And there is a good amount of live rock, but it's actually done in a negative space type of aquascape. So the rock is a lot of thinner pieces, and it's a lot of you know, branches and a lot of caves and things like that. There's a lot of swim throughs for the fish to swim through, and it really looks nice when you see it, especially when you can take into the account the depth of the tank and seeing all these different valleys and canyons in the tank.
Really nice.
It's really turned out really nice. And then equipment-wise, I have a nice custom-made Bash C sump. I run a whole bunch of matrix in the tank for biological filtration. The matrix has an incredibly large surface area for bacteria to colonize. And of course, with the rock that I use, it's a fairly dense rock, so you don't really get as much of the biofiltration out of it as you would with the old school live rock like Pucani and those kind of very porous rocks. So I make up for that using the matrix. I have a Bubble King Supermarine 300 skimmer on the tank, which does a great job of getting a lot of things out of the tank. I do run GFO on the tank occasionally. Again, not all of the time. Only when phosphate creeps up, I'll run some GFO. So I have a Aquamax reactor for that. I run. I initially had planned on putting a calcium reactor on the tank, but I started it out using 2-part and running it on Ecotech Versas. And it has been so successful that I decided if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Wow.
So I actually still use the B-Ionic from ESV as my 2. And I use the buckets.
I was going to say, how many mLs a day are you dosing with that stuff?
Let me tell you. I can tell you exactly what
I was dosing like 300
right
mLs a day on my 187-gallon system, and I was like, man, I can't afford to keep doing this. So I went to a calcium reactor.
You know, and I do like the calcium reactor. The type that I used was a Destaco, and the one concern that I had with the Destaco is the media is not, it's not crushed coral or any of it's actually a marble type media. It's very pure, but it only puts calcium and alkalinity into the water, so it doesn't handle the trace element part of the things. Whereas ESV has, or the B-Ionic I should say, has trace elements in it, so it's a little bit more of a complete solution. So my current dosing on the 500-gallon total water system is 654 milliliters
for each part.
So yes.
Ooh,
so I'm putting in over a liter a day. Yeah, it's going.
Yikes, man, that's more than double.
But again, it's crazy how much, but I use the 5-gallon buckets. I do get it wholesale,
I was
so
gonna
it's
say,
a little
all
bit
right,
easier.
good.
But yeah, and like I said, I've just become to the point of, it works so well for me that I actually sold my calcium reactor, so I don't even have it to fall back on. But for the time being, anyway, I'm real happy with how that has gone, and I know that as the corals grow out, and you'll see in the video, there's actually quite a few frags in there. They're not all full-size colonies at this point, because I collect over time, so I'm constantly on the lookout for something that's catches my eye that I want in my tank, or that I want to grow out for my farm system and to sell through my business. So there's a lot of smaller pieces in there that are going to grow. So I know that I'm at 650 milliliters right now, but I'll probably be approaching that 1,000 milliliters
Oy,
at some point.
man.
So
What's your
I may have to look into something a different solution for the future. But right now I'm good.
what's your pH running at in that tank? What's the range of the pH?
So I do run a CO2 scrubber on my skimmer, which helps for the bottom part of it. So it generally runs about 8 to 8.3 during the course of the day. At night, of course, it's much lower. Generally, it's around 8, and by midday, it's usually up to around 8.3.
Josh the Box is asking, do you find the 2-part raises salinity? I found it does when I was dosing a ton of it in my SPS Reef.
So I haven't run into any issues with that, but I'm a firm believer in water changes. So I actually do, it's my intent to set up automatic water changes, but that's one of those things that I've kind of put off, and I'll do it at some point. So right now I do about a 40-gallon water change per week, which is a little under 10% water change per week. And I also do a bigger water change around the first of the month, usually around 80 gallons. So I'm changing out, I guess that would come out to, about 200 gallons a month on the tank. And of course, pardon me. Excuse me. When I excuse me.
Take your time, man.
When I do that, when I do that, I test the water that I'm changing out prior to adding the new water in. So I know where my salinity is at on a weekly basis. And of course, I have my GHL system with the salinity probe, which I don't particularly trust those salinity probes very much, but it does give me an idea of if things are going up or going down. And because of that, I don't have too much of an issue. I also do what I guess you would call accidental, well, maybe not accidental, it's not the word, but unintentional water changes when I do shows. So when I go to a show, I'll take whatever water I need with me to the show, and that comes right out of my tanks, both my grow out and frag systems, and also out of the display tank too. If I'm taking some frags out of there, sometimes I'll have some things on racks in there just because they may be corals that are a little more sensitive to change, or that I know in my grow out systems they may change color a little on me, and so I'll just keep them in the display tank to keep the color that I've developed in that display tank. And then in that case I'm taking water out to go to the show with that too. So I generally do about one show per month, sometimes 2 shows in a month, and occasionally even more than that. So I actually end up changing out a whole bunch of water over the course of a month. And like I said, I've always been a firm believer in that. And I think as a vendor, it's pretty much impossible not to change water. Anytime I ship a coral out, I'm pulling water out to ship with. And so I go through quite a bit of water and a ton of salt every month.
What, how big is your tanks that you bring to the, you bring one tank to a show?
It depends on the show. If I'm driving, I actually will bring up to 6 tanks.
Wow.
I have the total of tanks, so I have 2 of them are 30 by 24 inches. 2 of them are 24 by 20 inches. And then I have 2 that are 20 by 18 inches. And the reason that I have them where they go down like that is when I do fly to some shows that aren't in driving distance to me, I take these tanks on the plane with me, and they actually will nest inside of each other. So I have a case. It's a nice Pelican case. Nest the tanks inside of them. Put them inside the Pelican case, and I can take four tanks in one case. So it works out great for me from a travel perspective to do that. And then, of course, when I drive, I can bring even more tanks because I don't have to worry about baggage and all of that. So I just bring all 6 of my frag tanks and set them up on the tables there. I'm actually planning on building some stands for them that a friend of mine who's a incredibly smart, has an engineer's mind. He's not an actual engineer right now, but he is just incredibly smart. His name's Jimmy Cox, and he can build just about anything. He's an amazing friend to have for a reefer for sure, and he's helping me out right now in trying to design some stands for the tanks, probably using 80/20 aluminum. And these stands will fold right down so that I can travel with those also, and then set them up at a show. And by doing that, I'll be able to have even more room for the tanks. So that's something that I'm hoping to get done before Reefapalooza in California, which is in August. So
sounds like you got this down to a science, man, in terms of traveling to shows. I mean, more power to you. I could never manage that. I mean, how many folks do you have helping you out doing all this?
So my wife used to do the shows with me, and that worked great. But
She bailed.
my son-in-law actually moved here with my daughter and their family last July from Maryland, and he took over a business, bought a local business that actually it's a product called Reef Chowder, and it used to be called Reef Stew, and it's sold by pretty much all of the local fish stores here in the valley in the Phoenix area, and it's a mix of phytoplankton, algae, copepods, and brine shrimp. So it's a great live food for your tanks. So when he got into the business, I said, "Hey, would you be interested in doing these shows with me? And I'll pay for your travel and your meals and things like that, and that might be kind of fun." And so now he does the shows with me. He's done them for about the last, I think, 6 months with me, and we have a great time when we go on these shows. It's a lot of fun. You get to meet a ton of hobbyists and a lot of other vendors and make a lot of connections. And of course, one of the most fun things for me is going around and looking at everybody else's corals and finding new goodies for my tanks and such.
There you go.
It's a great experience, really. We have a lot of fun with it, and so far it's been really good. Like I said, we do about 1 a month, and sometimes a few more than that. And we just got done doing a show in Santa Ana for Steve Tyree with the Coral Farmers Market. And then the following week, we were in Denver for Jake Adams' show, Reef Stock. And so those were back-to-back for us. So it was a little bit crazy, but it was fun. We had a real good time. And we just started flying to shows. Reef Stock was actually only our 2nd show that we've flown to. And it's been a learning experience for sure. And it's always interesting at the airport, talking to the airline people when you're bringing packages, these Pelican cases that weigh almost 100 pounds. And I found that with Southwest Airlines, if you fly with them, if you can keep your bags under 50 pounds, they'll fly for free, just like normal luggage. I haven't been able to do that yet, but I'm working on that. So my bags, if they are between 50 and 100 pounds, it's $75 per bag, which is cheaper than shipping them via, air freight or UPS or something like that. So that's what we've been doing. We actually take it just like it's our luggage, and we show up to the airport with these huge cases that weigh 98 pounds and put them up there on the scale, and everybody's like, "What's in those?" And I tell them, "Hey, it's corals, it's live coral," and but it's worked well so far. It's gone well, and we're still learning. I think our next one that we're going to fly to is going to be in October, and that'll be Dallas Reefapalooza in October. Fortunately, there's enough shows that are near me where I can drive to most of them. A lot of them are in California, and a few we have a show here a couple times a year in Phoenix. And we do Las Vegas has a few shows that we do, so it's enough to keep us busy and give us a pretty good schedule. And like I said, I try to schedule about 1 per month, and sometimes I'll do a few more than that. We have been trending towards some of the larger shows like Reefapalooza, Reef Stock, and Aquashella and such. So that's kind of where we're trying to get to, where those become most of our schedule, doing the live or the larger shows that are multiple day events.
Are you thinking about doing Reefapalooza in New York in June?
Not going to be able to do that one. I do have a show in Santa Ana for that month, and I considered it, but doing more than one show, and in this case it would be, again, back-to-back shows on back-to-back weekends.
Yeah.
That's
It's grind.
That's a lot of work, and at this point I'm not ready to take on too crazy of a schedule like that. I think next year, though, we're going to look to do that. I think we'd like to do all 4 Reefapaloozas next year. This year we are doing the Anaheim Reefapalooza in August, and then the Dallas Reefapalooza in October. So those will be the 2 that we do this year. And then the one I really would like to do is Reef Stock in Australia. That would be cool.
There you go. Wow, yeah, that's that.
I don't think that. I'm not sure how it would work to actually bring. I don't think I could bring Frags over there legally, so I couldn't probably be a vendor. But who knows? Maybe I'll attend it sometime. Anyway.
There you go. It sounds like a lot of fun. Yeah, I usually go to the Reefapalooza show in New York. So, but that's the only.
It's a great show.
Yeah, that's the only place I haven't been to any other Reefapaloozas. So getting back to the 2-part issue, I've seen this showed up a couple of different comments. Have you ever considered dosing a kalkwasser to help along the to ease the burden, I guess, on the 2-part? Have you thought about it, or have you done that?
Yeah. And I've actually run a calc reactor on my prior tank. So I have a calc reactor, or it's a calc stirrer. I have one, and I just haven't quite gotten around to adding it. It's one of those on my to-do lists, and I suppose 2 years, I probably should have it on there by now, but I haven't done it yet. But yeah, I do plan to have that. I would never dose it out of my ATO, just because it's going to be based on how much evaporation you have then, and so it's going to be inconsistent. And we have extremely low humidity here in Arizona. Most of the year, it's actually below 10%, which is great for evaporative cooling. I don't have to use any chillers on any of my systems, but it also means that if I were to dose through my ATO, I would be dosing an awful lot of kalkwasser. So I would prefer to have it, more steady and know exactly how much I'm putting in there, especially since it's going to be in relation to the 2-part dosing too. So it's definitely on my plan to run the calc stirrer here in the near future. It also has the added benefit of helping reduce some phosphates, and so I think that would probably be a good thing for me too, to help out in a little bit more of a natural way.
Have you ever, or are you dosing bacteria?
Actually, I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So I use ProtiBio. I use their Bio Digest.
Yep.
I've also used MB7 from Brightwell, and prior to switching over to the ProtiBio, I have been dosing that on a weekly basis. I would dose to all of my systems. I have found that it's fairly easy, if you're not doing that, to have your bacteria get out of balance. There's always, in every tank, there's always good and bad bacteria. It's impossible to not have any of the bad bacteria, such as Vibrio and such, in there. If you have it properly balanced, though, it generally, the bad bacteria are in lower levels and won't cause problems. The problems can be when things get out of balance, and you end up with things like Vibrio and such that will cause issues with your corals. And I have had that happen. I don't know that for a scientific fact. I didn't do any kind of a biome test or anything like that, so I can't say for a fact that it was my bacteria getting out of balance. But I do know that once I started dosing some of the bacterial products and doing some water changes, it took care of the issue. So for me, that was enough to say that it's not going to hurt anything, and it's not that big of an expense to me. So I think, for me, it's something that works. And in fact, one of the things that I wanted to talk about on the show with you today, and I kind of mentioned it, was I did have another problem with the tank, and this was fortunately a much slower moving problem. And it happened to me before, so I should have recognized the signs sooner, but I didn't. But basically, I had some magnets that rusted in the tank. They were in my frag racks, and I didn't notice them. I just noticed that things started to lose polyp extension and some color. Very, very slow process. But I noticed it in particular when I started looking at some pictures from about a year ago, and I was like, huh, things don't look like that right now. I wonder what the problem is. So I started doing some water changes and looking for issues. I sent out ICP tests, and eventually it occurred to me that, you know what, maybe it was magnets again, because in a past tank I had a probe holder that rusted, and it was the same thing where I couldn't figure out. All my tests came back okay and such. I removed the probe holder once I found it, did some water changes, and boom, within a month things had bounced back. And again, the exact same thing has happened with this tank. I had these magnetic frag racks in the tank, and I pulled them out, and sure enough, I could see the magnets were rusted in there. Got them out of the tank, did some water changes, did some heavy doses of bacteria to get things kind of just kick-started with that, and now things have rebounded very nicely here in the last month. So, you know, if it isn't one thing, it's another.
It's always like, something. It's always something.
Yeah,
you know?
When you think you've got it all figured out, you know, something like that happens. And again, it was such a slow process. I would say it's been about a year where it's been affecting my tank.
Huh.
And I noticed it in the one thing that I really noticed it in, beyond just the color of the corals and the polyp extension, was my uptake of the alkalinity. It had dropped significantly over the course of, in particular, the last, I'd say, 3 to 4 months. And I was like, wow, you know, that's a bad sign. That means things aren't growing as they were before. And so I had actually reduced my alkalinity dosing from the 600. It was actually as high as 830 at one point, milliliters per day. I had actually reduced it all the way down to about 350
Oh, wow, that's a big drop.
Now I'm back up to about 630 milliliters a day. So you can see it's rebounding and on the upward trend, which of course is the best sign of growth, other than physically measuring things and seeing things get bigger. Knowing that they're taking up that alkalinity and calcium is just a great sign. So it's you know, I think a lot of people think that, especially if you grow corals in a farm system like I do, as well as a display tank, that it's, you know, things are on autopilot and you don't run into nearly as many issues as some of the hobbyists and maybe less experienced people do. But it's the same for us as vendors. You know, we run into these kind of issues, and again, when you kind of are on autopilot and things are going great, that's always when you know, something can creep up like that.
You get complacent.
You have to be diligent about it. Yeah, exactly. You do. You get complacent. You think, wow, this is great. I'm finally, you know, everything's dialed in. And it just goes to show that you always have to keep an eye on everything. You really do. And in that case, it was part laziness. The frag racks that I had in the tank were all these frags that I had purchased to mount in the tank, and I hadn't gotten around to mounting them. So they were just sitting on these racks. And while the racks were designed for use in a marine aquarium, and they shouldn't have rusted, they did. You know, that's what happened. At this point, I've removed as many magnets from my tanks as possible. My buddy Jimmy, that I was talking about earlier, he helped me out with a few things. He has a bunch of 3D printers, and so he is always designing different things for the aquarium. And he actually, I use some Maxspect gyres on one end of my 460-gallon tank, and they're very effective at moving the water.
Yep.
Does a great job, especially on a peninsula tank. But again, they have magnets, so they haven't rusted or anything that I know of in this tank. But I decided, okay, I want to get the magnets out of the water. So he designed a mounting system that actually mounts the gyres to the Eurobrace on my tank.
Oh, cool.
So now, yeah, so now it's about a 2-inch mount. It keeps the magnet just above the water, and but the gyre runs the same way that it did before when I had the magnets in the water. But now I don't have to worry about the magnets rusting in the water. So the only magnets that I do have in the tank are on the MP60s that I run. But with those, I actually rotate them out on a monthly basis. So if they do start to rust, I'll notice it. And so I think at this point I've gotten it where I shouldn't run into any magnetic issues in the tank rusting. So that's something that I think reefers should be cognizant of, though. Make sure you check your magnets regularly.
This is the second time somebody's made this comment. I need a Jimmy Cox in my life, too. Yeah, you know, the same thing happened to me with a frag rack. You know, I thought it was a high quality frag rack in terms of the magnets and all that
Yeah.
stuff, and it was in one of my frag tanks, and you know, I'm not sure I was actually to the point where I was having issues with the tank in terms of corals being impacted and being stressed out by what was going on with the magnet in the tank, but I don't know. So somehow I noticed that one of the magnets had completely rusted out. So yeah,
How long do you think it was in there rusted?
you know, probably a couple of months, I would think.
Okay.
Probably a couple of
Yeah,
months.
and in this case, I think it was probably close to a year.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a real slow thing,
Yeah.
which is why I think it's an overlooked issue. And I've seen the debates, you know, on different boards and different, social media and such about, oh, well, we use GFO in our tanks and that's just rust. So I don't think rust is an issue. And, yes, GFO is basically rust, there's no doubt. But in that case, we know what the metal is that's rusting and what it's designed for the aquarium. The magnets that are used in frag racks are not designed to be in an aquarium. They're standard, rare earth, most of the time rare earth magnets that were never designed to be in salt water. And I can almost guarantee you take one of those rare earth magnets and throw it into your sump and let it go for a year, you're going to have issues. And it's probably going to be a lot sooner than a year because it's not being protected by any acrylic or anything like that. So while you can say, yeah, we use GFO and that's just rust, it's not the same. It is, like I said, those rare earth magnets or any other magnet that you don't know what's in there. And even the same a magnet that's used, if you have several different reef or frag racks from the same company, the magnets aren't necessarily from the same supplier, and they're not necessarily the same batch. So you don't know what the magnets are that are going in there. So if your one frag rack has never rusted or it has rusted and hasn't caused any problem, that doesn't mean that another piece of equipment isn't going to cause the problem. So I'm not saying don't use magnets in aquariums, but what I am saying is check them regularly.
Yeah.
And especially if you do start to notice some changes in how things are going and you can't find any other issue, that's going to be something that I would say check any magnet that's in your tank. And it can be the smallest magnet that you don't even think about. Like in my case previously, it was a probe holder. I checked all my other magnets on the obvious things like power heads and stuff. I didn't even think about the probe holder. And then one day I was in there cleaning the probes and I was like, this is a magnet too. I pulled it off and sure enough, it had broken open and was rusty.
I'm going to, right after we get off this live stream, I'm going to go check my probe holder magnets. Sometimes you sometimes you just take certain things for granted. You don't even think about stuff and things like absolutely. Just are right. Let me ask you this question before I forget because somebody had asked it a while ago in the chat. In terms of lighting, you're still using the Radion, the Ecotech Radions, and you use like a hybrid solution, right? With
yeah, exactly. So my lighting over this tank is the same as it's been over other tanks that I've had over the past few years. I run the Radion, most of the G4 Pros. I do have a couple of G5s that I've added on, that I've replaced G4s with. And the main reason I did that was to get the Wi-Fi capability. So I run the G4 Pros with the T5s in the aquatic light fixtures. So the way it looks over this tank, and I think most people that use LEDs know this, one of the shortcomings of LEDs is that they're a point source light, and you can really get a lot of shading, in particular if you go by the manufacturer's recommendations. So my solution for that was to cover the whole tank. So instead of using just a couple of fixtures over the tank where I'm going to get a lot of shading, even with the T5s, and particularly because this tank's a 30-inch deep tank also, what I did was I have 4 of the 36-inch aquatic light fixtures. And remember, my width on the tank is 42 inches. So I'm going perpendicular to the front of the tank. The 36-inch length covers just about all of the rock work. So, because the rocks aren't stacked up against the side of the glass at all. And so I have, over the tank, I've got 4 of those units. And in each one of those 36-inch units, I have 2 XR30s and 1 XR15. So they're basically stacked up right against each other, and that just creates almost a whole panel of light over the entire tank.
Yeah.
And then in addition, of course, each one of those fixtures has 4 T5 bulbs in them. So I'm running 16 T5 bulbs over the tank too. So I have the ability of probably cranking up my PAR to 800 or 900 over the top of the tank if I wanted to run it full like that.
Wow.
I don't. I run it lower than that. I generally run around 500 at the top, and that gives me about 300 at the bottom on the sand bed.
Yeah.
And just like you mentioned, I'm primarily SPS. That gives me light to put corals almost anywhere that I want to. I have corals that are, you know, right down near the bottom of the tank, and they grow just fine like that. So
yeah, you know, you had me thinking when we were talking a couple of years ago, because I was just kind of in the, I think I was in the planning stages of my Peninsula tank, and I ended up getting, you know, a 6 foot long by 3 foot wide by 20-inch tall Peninsula tank. I love the dimensions on it. So I was thinking about the aquatic life fixtures, but I don't remember the specifics, but I just couldn't figure out a way to get the amount of lights that I wanted over that tank with those fixtures. It didn't. I think I wanted to get 2 rows of the light fixtures, and the aquatic life was just not. Somehow it wasn't going to work in terms of the dimensions that I had on that tank. So I ended up going with 6 GHL Mitras over the tank, and yeah, the coverage has been great. I'm getting similar par numbers that you're talking about in terms of like close to 500 at the top and 300 near the bottom. So it's yeah, I mean, I've got 6 fixtures over that tank, so it's I think it's definitely helpful to have that full coverage on a tank if you're like an SPS person like we are to help the.
I agree. Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest issue with the LEDs is that you really can't. I mean, you can if you're doing, especially with a mixed tank or LPS or things like that, you can get away with fewer fixtures and go by the manufacturer recommendation. But honestly, if you're a collector like both of us are and really want to provide the best conditions you can for your corals, having that complete blanket of light where you avoid as much shading as possible is super important.
So, all right, man, let's talk about corals. Let's talk about some specifics. Somebody made a comment about the anacropora that you have in the tank. It's just like crazy. I think they also, there's a comment about the Lingsai cap. Was that that correct? That's a classic. That's a classic.
Yeah.
You also have the rainbow splice. Do you still have the rainbow splice? You were like one of the first people that I was talking to that actually had that rainbow splice. And I think at that time, weren't you selling frags for like $2,000 or something like that? I mean, it was like crazy money.
Yeah, so that's actually what I paid for my initial frag. I've never charged that much for it, but I have sold actually quite a few frags over the last year to year and a half, I think. Generally, the price has come down a little bit on it. It's still ridiculously expensive, and it's one that your average reefer is probably not going to be real interested in getting a piece like that, especially where the price is right now. But for the collectors out there, it's well worth it. It's a beautiful, beautiful coral, and it's a pretty good grower. It's also a very hardy coral, extremely hardy. In fact, I had one that I shipped out a few months ago, and FedEx dropped the ball on it, and it took 2 days to get there. And it
man!
lived, so,
really?
Yeah, it's a scary
you must have
one.
been. Yeah, well, but you had insurance, I'm assuming.
Yeah. So but that's a beautiful piece. Right now, I think.
Let me stop.
I try to be in time.
One more question in terms of the splice. I think a lot of conversation about. Primarily, it seems to be like green, or I guess people that get green frags. The question is, will it develop the other color? So. What are your thoughts in terms? What's been your experience in terms of the green versus the pink or the red in that coral and getting like a mostly green frag?
That's the $2,000 question, right?
Yeah.
And it kind of remains to be seen a little bit on that. So the green definitely seems to be more dominant with the coral, which is a little strange because I know that the coral started out as a red coral, red or pink, magenta kind of color. and got this infection, the green fluorescent protein infection. So you would think that the red would remain dominant, but the green appears to be the more dominant, and that's the case with my colonies too. There's no doubt that there is more green on them. I've sold, so the going rate for a green frag of the rainbow splice is usually around $300 for about a 3/4 of an inch piece. Whereas one that has a balance of colors on it is still going for around $1,500 in a lot of cases.
Wow.
You can find them a little less expensive with both colors in some cases. I generally sell 3/4 inch frag with both colors for somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,200. It always depends on the frag. And then $300 for, like I said, for an all green one. Now, all of that being said, I sold a piece to a friend here in Arizona. He's on the boards. He goes by Xanthurum on Reef to Reef. And his name is Eddie, and he purchased a piece from me, about a 3/4 inch piece that had just a small red streak on it. And it started growing out for him, and in his tank it grows. I've never seen one grow faster. His tank, for whatever reason, the rainbow splice just loves it.
Wow.
And for a while, he was worried because it was growing just all green. The red part wasn't expanding at all. And, you know, he mentioned it to me, and I was like, okay, well, I'll get you another piece of the red so you can add it to it, and hopefully that'll start to take off. But before I could even do that, as it grew out, all of a sudden the red started popping up on different areas on his coral. And now he's actually got quite a bit of red on it. And there's a post about it. I think it's on Reef to Reef, and it's something like the green the green rainbow splice support group. Something like that is the title of the thread. And it's people that have bought the green rainbow splice, and it's just growing out green for them right now. So he went on and posted pictures of his to show how much red has come into it. On mine, I have 3 colonies of it right now. And I'm seeing the same thing happen with mine, where there's areas of green and the red will pop up out of the blue in it. So
do you think that, I mean, what percentage of green-only frags are developing red? Would you put a percentage on it?
Yeah, I don't know, and I think you have to give it some time also.
Yeah.
A lot of people have just purchased them, you know, in recent months, and so I think over time, as the coral gets bigger, you're going to most of those will see the red come in. It generally develops from the tip. You'll see it in the terminal corallite, and it'll start to generally come down the side of the frags when it develops in the tip of the coral. But that being said, I would say that most colonies that I've seen, and including the ones that I have, it's probably about 60% green, 40% red. And then the red will also come and go. I had a that I put into my display tank, the initial piece I put in there, and that one was about 75% red. And over time, as it's grown out, even the areas of red that were on it in specific spots, it lost some of those, and then it would pop up in other areas on it. So, yeah, I'm certainly not going to pretend that, you know, it's always going to have 50-50 on it. That simply isn't the case. That being said, I think as they grow out, most of the people that have bought green ones will start to see some red come out in it. And when it does, it's amazing. I mean, it's really is a beautiful coral. So that's my experience, and the experience that the people that I know locally that have it. Only a few people have bought it from me locally. Most of the frags that I've sold have been at either shows or sold online off my website. So.
So Sammy31D is asking a question. I'm not sure if it's to you, but seeing the grafted and Acropora on Reef Report. Have you heard of this grafted? Okay, I haven't. That's the first I've heard of that.
Yeah, Jake actually put out an article about it just before Reef Stock. So I was talking to him about it at Reef Stock, and basically it's the Jason Fox TNT and Acropora. That's a red color.
Yep.
And the goldenrod, Reef Ref Canada goldenrod, and apparently the same thing happened there. I don't think it was an actual graft. I think it picked up this infection in the tank. I'm not positive about that. And so now you have this yellow and red Anacropora that's really, really cool looking.
Wow.
I have both of those Anacroporas. I haven't seen that happen yet, but I haven't tried mounting them on one piece yet. So that's something I'll do in the future here and see if I can get them to do that also. The goldenrod Anacropora is just a beautiful piece. It's that mustard yellow with the pink polyps, and it's a super fast grower too.
Was that the big colony we saw in your tank?
No, that's actually that one's the green goblin Anacropora. Did you show the video yet?
Yeah, a while ago. Yeah, I'm sorry,
okay,
I should have mentioned
it. So, on that video, as you're coming around the end of the tank, you'll see the RRC goldenrod, and that one's a bright yellow, and that's at the short end of the tank. And then on the back side of the tank is where that green goblin Anacropora is, and that colony is bigger than a basketball. That thing is just huge.
Yeah, that was awesome. Somebody's asking to, this was a comment a while ago, that please bring the goldenrod to Vegas.
Yeah, I plan to. So I generally have both of those Anacroporas at most shows because they are both very fast growers. So that's one of the easiest ones out there to grow and frag for sure.
Just quickly, a couple people were asking way back in the chat. Corals and big clam not impacted by the lanthanum chloride, right?
Yeah, the corals look great today. No impacts at all. The clam looks happy as a clam. So
that's an awesome clam, man.
Yeah, so knock on wood. But I think that in this case, it was the ones that are most susceptible to the issue. The tangs and the wrasses were the primary victims of this. A few tanks did survive or have to this point, and I'm keeping a close eye on them. But they're eating and swimming normally. My Sohal tang is good. My powder blue tang, and what's the other one that's looking good? There was another tang. I can't recall right offhand, but that tang is also looking good. And a few wrasses also are doing just fine. I have a captive bred cleaner wrasse that's doing great, an exquisite wrasse that's doing just fine, and a nice leopard wrasse, and again, they're all doing fine. So it just kind of hit and miss on which fish are affected by it. So,
dude, I want to be cognizant of the situation, or do you need to go and check on the tank and all that stuff?
No, everything looks. I can see it from where I'm at, and everything seems to be okay. So, yeah, there's really nothing to do right now except observe.
So, Courtney Jameson, any advice for a Monty cap that is encrusting, folding up under itself instead of plating?
I actually have, if you take a look at the video, I have the WWC grafted cap right in the front tank, and I've noticed that the parts of it that aren't shaded by other corals is actually growing down, doing exactly what he's saying. So my guess is that it's probably a little too much light, and I think if you put it in an area with a little bit lower light, it should start to grow in that Capricornus formation where it spirals up. Again, if you refer to the video, right in the middle of the tank, it's a little bit hard to see, but in the very middle of the tank, in the middle of all that rock work, I have a Steve Tyree flower petal monopora in there, and it's basically shaded by all the corals. It doesn't get a whole lot of light, but it's growing beautifully in there. In fact, it's huge. It's the size of a dinner plate, and it's starting to spiral upwards now. But I've noticed with some of the ones that are out and under the full light, including the length IceCap that I have in the front of the tank there, again, if you look at that, the front part, which is directly underneath full light, is growing down, whereas the back part, which is shaded by other corals and such, is growing up. So that would be my best guess, is that it's probably just a little more light than is needed, and reduce the light or move it to a lower light area, and it should start to spiral upwards.
Speaking of caps, and you mentioned the Worldwide Corals grafted cap, I got a frag of that several years ago, and I had it in one of my frag tanks. Had a little green, in the middle of it. Just, it's like this little, it was mostly an orange frag with a little kind of lightning bolt of green in the middle of it. That was the only, the green has not grown at all. And I have this cap now in my peninsula tank, and it is the size of a dinner plate, and there is no green in it. It's like, it looks like a freaking basic orange Monty cap, and it's beautiful. I love it. You know, I love caps, but for some reason, this grafted cap just kind of was stuck in neutral in terms of that green color. I mean, have you ever run into that situation with grafted corals that just really are stuck in neutral in terms of that one color?
Yeah, it hasn't happened with mine, but if you look at the one that I have in my, and I have a couple of them, I have an even bigger one in my grow out system. The one in my grow out system is very balanced. It's got, orange here and green here, and it's really super nice, and it's got a whole bunch of the spiraling going on. The one in the display tank has, the left side of it has a patch about the size of my hand that's all orange, and then as you go to the right, it becomes a really nice mix of it. So I'm not sure what would cause that, but what I have done in the past is I've taken a piece of the green and cut it and glued it right onto the orange.
That's what I should have done.
Yeah, so I can ship you a piece of the green if you want. So I've got a lot of it. So.
Unless I try to just cut it out from the center, but yeah, maybe I should just get the green from you and then restart her up.
Yeah, it's
worth the issue.
I literally just glue it right on and let it encrust, and then it starts to grow and gets that. The other one that I have is a grafted digitata, and it's the same colors as the Capricornus, and that one is the same kind of deal where the orange and the green kind of pops up wherever it feels like it, but sometimes it'll grow mostly green here and mostly orange here. So I'll just cut a piece of the orange off, put it into the green, cut a piece of the green off and put it into the orange, let it grow into it, and that seems to get it nice and balanced doing that.
So what are some of your other favorite corals in your systems there, Bill?
Oh, I have so many.
Give me your top. Give me your top three. Top three.
Well, I have a very small frag, about maybe an inch long, of Reef Raft USA's Angry Birds, and that is just an amazing piece. It really is one of those ones where there's no, you don't need to do any photoshopping or anything like that to make it look good. It's just absolutely beautiful. It's also beautiful in full spectrum as well as the blue lights. So I would say that right now that is one of for sure my top three. I have, it's obviously it's real small right now, but that's one that I'm trying to grow out. I just acquired a piece of Vivid's Insanity. That's a tenuous, also beautiful piece, bright pinks, absolutely gorgeous. Some of the older ones that I really like, obviously Jason Fox Homewrecker is a gorgeous piece. The Walt Disney from Mike Bigger, rest in peace, Mike. But that coral is still an amazing piece. When it's grown out and lit properly, it's just gorgeous. Some of that goldenrod in acropore is one of my favorites. It's a really beautiful piece, and when it's in a little lower light, which is a nice thing about it, it does well in lower light, it'll actually develop pink polyps, and so that pink on the yellow is a really beautiful look. But yeah, I have just so many that are pretty crazy looking. I have one that I imported myself from Indonesia about 2 years ago. It's a slower growing tenuous, and I call that my Epic Aquaculture Catalina wine mixer. I don't know if you've seen the movie Step Brothers, but it came from that. And it's a beautiful piece. It's kind of blue with the flame polyps on it. So if you want to see that, you can see it on my website, and that's a beautiful, beautiful
Somebody's
piece. So
asking your web address. It's epicaquaculture.com, right?
That's correct. Yep. www.epicaquaculture.com. And you can see that one on there. Like I said, the Catalina wine mixer. It's a truly beautiful tenuous. I also have one more that I just recently named and started growing out. I actually got it from a friend, and it was an unnamed coral that he got from a wholesaler, and it's a beautiful, bright, glowing orange with yellow on it. It's absolutely gorgeous. So I named that one Prestige Worldwide, which is also from the movie Step Brothers. So that's kind of my series right now. It's the Step Brothers.
Great Beer Reef is wondering, does Bill still have the North Star spatula?
It's actually a clathrata, but yes, I still have that, and it's grown out beautifully. It's a gorgeous pink tabling acro. Again, that one's on my site and is available.
I've been growing that one out too. I actually picked it up from Battle Corals. So that is
oh, nice.
that is a gorgeous pink table.
It really is. Yeah, that was one that I brought in. What would have been around 2000, so 22 years ago. Brought that into the U.S. from Indonesia, and it's a true tabling coral too, which is really so nice. I mean, the way that it grows is just such a nice formation. Has beautiful colors to it. So yeah, that's a great piece.
What was I going to ask? Oh, so what coral do you not have that you would like to acquire?
Oh, I've got a couple that are on my radar, and I've had a few that I've lost that I need to get back. And fortunately, I have some friends that, you know, I like to bank corals with people.
Yeah, banking is good.
My good friends. Yeah, Jimmy and Eddie are both, you know, they're kind of my banks around here. So they have a lot of the pieces. But one of them that I lost that I really love, and I think this was part of the rust issue that I had, I didn't lose much in that issue. Most things survived and have now recovered, but I did lose my Big R Candyland, which was a really nice piece. So I want to get that one back, and fortunately it's done well for my buddy Eddie, so he's going to get me a piece of that here sometime soon. I told him to wait until I know everything is going well before I put it back in there, so I'll probably do that in a month or two. I know that Shane Backer from SBBcorals.com, he has a lot of super nice tenuous that are, you know, various rainbow colors. So there's a few that he has that I'd like to get my hands on, and I've got quite a few of his pieces. They're always beautiful. Rudy Batara at Golden Basket Reefs has a couple of pieces that I got a few of him, his pieces a few months ago that are doing real well for me, and he's got a couple more that I want to get. So yeah, I mean, there's always something out there, you know.
For sure.
So many people have imported so many beautiful corals over the last few years. I try to stay away from wild corals. If I do bring some in, and occasionally I will import some myself, I keep them in my systems for a minimum of a year before I'm willing to frag it for myself. And then once I frag it, I grow out mother colonies from those frags. So I won't sell them until they become second generation. And that's kind of my definition of what aquaculture is to me. 12 months in captivity and then second generation for the frags. So, you know, occasionally I'll get a couple of boxes of corals in. I think a lot of people don't realize how difficult it is to bring wild corals in and get them to acclimate to captive life. A lot of them will do well for a month or so, and when you go to your local fish stores and you see these beautiful tenuous colonies that they get in and such, most of the time they've only been in for, sometimes it's that same week, but in a lot of cases it's within a week or two of them getting them in and being out of the ocean. And so they still look pretty healthy and such, but without them becoming acclimated to captive life, in a lot of cases those corals will die within the next few months. So, pardon me for one second.
Yeah. Do what you got to do, man. Sounds like the dog needs to go out.
The dogs had to go out. Yeah, the dogs had to go out. So, so, you know, when you get those captive, or pardon me, those both maricultured and wild corals, and they're just not used to our systems. And obviously there's a huge difference between the ocean and what we can provide for them. So my success rate on wilds and maricultured has been somewhere in the neighborhood of about 70% when I get a box in. So if I get 20 corals in a box, I fully expect to probably lose about 6 of those 20.
Gotcha.
If I can do better than that, I'm ecstatic. And sometimes, of course, it's worse than that. It all depends on the stress and you know what those corals are used to and such. But at 70% within the first month, and then occasionally over the next year or so, sometimes they just up and die. You know, they just seem to be doing great for 6 months, and then boom, RTN. You know. So I think that a lot of people wonder about, oh, well, how do we price our corals as a vendor, especially aquaculture corals? How do we price them, and why are some so expensive? And I agree with everybody. I think, coral prices, it's ridiculous what we pay nowadays because back when I first started and when you first started, it was no problem to get a full colony for 50 bucks, and I'm talking big colonies, not those
changed.
ones we see now, mariculture, And, and obviously now a $50 frag is going to be something that's fairly common. You don't find too many that are in the $10 to $20 range anymore at all. And the way that I think that what a lot of people don't understand, in particular for aquaculture corals, and for somebody like me who I'm not a chop shop, I don't get mine in and flip them that month. A lot of people do that, and that's what they do, and that's if people are happy buying those, that's good for you. That's great. I personally don't think that's a good way to do business, but so for me, if I buy that box of 20 corals, I have it shipped to me from Indonesia. I have to pay the air freight on it, which of course, especially since COVID and now with gas prices and things like that, just skyrocketed. And obviously you have to pay the cost of the corals. Then you have to get them in. You have to dip them. You have to make sure you remove as many pests as you can find. A lot of the pests won't show up for at least 30 days. Even with a good dipping plan. So I quarantine them, and I dip them on a weekly basis. I use potassium chloride primarily because that's one of the few dips that actually kills acro-eating flatworms. And just for everybody's information out there, if you're getting wild or maricultured, if you do not quarantine and dip, you will get acro-eating flatworms eventually.
I use the potassium chloride too, and it's great. The thing I love about that stuff is it's clear, so you can actually see the pest coming off, and it seems to be kind of gentle. It seems to be gentle on the corals too. So you do. It
is. I mean, corals will get irritated by it and slime a lot at first, but I've never lost a coral from dipping in potassium chloride, including the wilds and such. I have to let the dogs in.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, this Taco is our yellow lab.
Just want to thank Rob Upstate. Want to thank what a cutie. Rob Upstate New York, man. So thanks for the super chat. What was I going to ask you? So, do you think that the weekly dips in the potassium chloride is breaking the cycle in terms of the eggs, or you still have to monitor, columns?
So you have to be diligent. Yeah, for sure. The potassium chloride won't kill the eggs.
Right.
As far as I know, there's really nothing that will kill the eggs. So you do have to break the life cycle with them. I always thought of, because I have a friend who got acro-eating flatworms, and I had never experienced them in a tank before, so I was not familiar with it. I always, for the last few years, I've used potassium chloride, but when I said I'd never had acro-eating flatworms, in a way it's not true because I have seen them come in on wild corals, but I've never had them as an infestation in a tank. I've been fortunate enough to catch them using my quarantine and using my dipping methods. So I have some experience with them that I hadn't really thought about before. But so yeah, that's the key. Break the life cycle. You do the dip initially, you'll see them come off. With the potassium chloride, the flatworms, they come off and they'll actually disintegrate. It's actually
I've seen the same thing.
Fun experience.
Yeah, because it's an osmotic reaction, right? I think it's basically it's the water inside of them, so they burst their cells.
Right, you're raising the salinity of the water with the chloride, and so yeah, they'll just basically, like you said, their cells are bursting and they'll disintegrate, fall apart. But it won't do anything to the eggs. So obviously, you can brush the eggs off as best you can, scrape them off as much as possible. Even then, though, the odds are you're not going to get every single one of them. So quarantining any wild and maricultured piece will help you with that process. It also makes it super easy to dip because you're not mounting it to the rock and having it start to grow onto the rock. So yeah, my process would be to do it on a weekly basis and do it for about 8 weeks is usually best. Once I get past that 8th dip, and have done it for 8 weeks, you can be pretty certain that if you haven't seen an acro-eating flatworm, that you've taken care of them, and the life cycle is gone. But after that, I still continue to observe them, and they still will stay in my grow-out tanks for a minimum of 6 months before I would add it. If it's one that I want personally for my display tank, I'll wait at least 6 months before it'll go into my display tank, and it has to be showing 0 issues with pests, and it has to be growing at that point too. So for example, the Catalina wine mixer is a perfect example. Now that one didn't come in with acro-eating flatworms or anything on it, but it still went through the whole same process. So it didn't go into my display tank until about a year after I got it in. And like I said, it's a beautiful piece, so I wanted it in my personal collection. So
Jake Adams is asking a question that I actually was going to ask you next. My question was 3 of the most underrated SPS out there, and Jake's question is, what is the most overlooked acro that you grow and sell? So let's go with Jake's question.
So the most, you know what? I'm going to go with the Oregon Tort. Actually.
I love that.
And the reason I say that, yeah, the reason I say that is it's just such a beautiful coral. You really won't find a more blue coral anyway. The growth structure is a really cool structure. It's fairly hardy
frickin' blue.
once it's established, and it's just amazingly beautiful. And the reason I say that it's one that's overlooked quite often, and in particular at shows, is that it's blue, and at shows everybody wants to see the corals under the blue light. Well, blue corals don't show under blue lights. They look, they don't, you can't even see them hardly because they're so blue. And so I personally run the AB Plus spectrum on my own tanks. But when I go to a show, I do what the customer wants, because the customer
crank
is
up
always
those
right,
blues?
and I run my light blue. So quite honestly, I don't sell that many frags of the Oregon Tort, even though it's not all that expensive compared to a lot of the higher end pieces that are out there now that are charging, you know, $300, $400 for. I generally will sell a 1 to 1.5 inch frag of Oregon Tort that has multiple branches for around $60. So, and I remember when it was first becoming popular, when Steve Wiest brought it in, and people started getting their hands on it. I think people were charging $300 or $400 for frags of it back then.
Yeah.
And that, again, that was 20 years ago. So, but for it to cost that much back then would probably mean it was kind of the equivalent of a rainbow splice today, where in those dollars, if you figured it, it's probably several $1,000s a frag with inflation built in there.
You know, it's a very good point. And I think another thing that we overlook in terms of pricing for certain acros, and maybe you mentioned this before, Bill, but also like the growth rates, right? You know, if you have a coral that just grows so freaking slow, and it's a good-looking coral, then that should factor into the price. You know, not to say that, you know, certain coral prices need to be jacked up, but I think that's a legit reason for a coral to be expensive, is because it takes the person that's growing it out, or the company that's growing it out, a long time to produce frags for that coral. Then I think that can be justified, and it's not marketing. You know, it's just something that takes a long time to produce.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And in the case of those corals, you're talking about the electricity. 1 second.
Those dogs are high maintenance.
All right, the other dog had to come back in now too. So now we're set.
Now
I
you're
think
set.
we can be left in some peace here. So with those type of corals, you're talking about the electricity. You're talking about the salt, any additives. You know, your calcium, your alkalinity, the water bill, all of these things, it all costs money, your overhead for growing that one coral out, and obviously acquiring that coral. There's an expense in that, and the wholesalers out there have caught on to what people want, so they've raised the prices on those fancy corals when they see them come in. You know, a few years ago, I think that the exporters and the wholesalers weren't so much aware of things like the Walt Disney that was commanding $1,000 for a frag when it first came in. But as they learned that, they figured out, hey, I want my piece of the pie. So now instead of paying $50 for rainbow tenuis, you may end up paying, and I'm talking about the vendor who's importing it, you may end up paying, you know, 200 that same coral. So that's, you know, a 400% increase in the cost of the coral itself. And then, you know, as a vendor, it's not a charity, you know, and it's more than a hobby. You're trying to make a profit to pay your bills, to feed your family and such. So you have to have a profit margin in there, or you're spinning your wheels. So while sometimes I do think there is a tendency for some vendors to definitely price higher than it needs to be, you know, it's not always the case that's an automatic fact, that just because a vendor gets a nice piece and slaps a funny name on it or something like that, that they're only doing that in order to get into your pocketbook. I try to price my corals below market. That's actually one of the things that I do when I acquire a piece. And most of my pieces have been acquired from other hobbyists and other vendors. So I'm generally paying retail, just like everybody else out there. Like I said, the Rainbow Splice, when I got it, I paid $2,000 for it.
Yeah, you took a hit there.
When I when I buy you know, a home wrecker or something like that, in a lot of cases, I'm buying it just like you are, you know, or just like any hobbyist is buying it, paying the full price for it. And now there are times where I might trade with other vendors, and that's always a great way to do it for me, because we can both trade our $300 corals, and neither one of us is out $300.
Yeah, exactly.
So that works good. You know? But a lot of times I just buy it outright at a show or online or whatever the case is. So you're talking about these corals. If I acquire a 1-inch piece of rainbow splice, it's going to take me 2 years to grow that into a sizable colony to where I'm ready to frag it. I also do not chop my colonies up. I only take a few frags at a time off of them. So I feel that sometimes if you over-frag a colony, you're going to cause it undue stress and risk it RTNing on you. So I try to only take 2 or 3 of a frag off of a good-sized colony, and I try to keep them, you know, colony-sized. So, like I said, if I acquire a 1-inch frag, it's going to take me probably, depending on the speed of growth, in the neighborhood of 1 year to 2 years of growing that out, which is 1 year or 2 of electricity, of water, of all those things that we just talked about that I'm doing to grow that coral. So my $2,000 rainbow splice, yeah, it started at $2,000, but by the time I'm fragging it and able to start recouping some of that, I may have put in, you know, $4,000 into that coral, growing it out. So, you know, again, that goes into the price too, and again, we're trying to, as a vendor, and for me, this is my way of making a living. I don't do anything else. Well, I shouldn't say that. I did have to take on a part-time job in the last year due to COVID cutting down sales, but hopefully things will be bouncing back as we move away from that. But for the most part, my income is generated entirely by my revenue from coral shows and my website, as well as some local sales too. So.
Yep. All right, dude. Well, listen, it's we've been talking for over an hour and a half. I think you need to go check in with the tank there, because like we said, it's you know, you gotta it's a gut wrenching type of thing, and it kind of rocks your world a little bit, and you got to make sure your animals are you know, the ones that are still there are doing okay. So, absolutely. Dude, any last final words there you want to pass along? We already talked about your website, epicaquaculture.com.
Yes, appreciate that. And if anybody is interested, I do quite a few shows. My show schedule is listed on the website. So if you want to come out and meet me in person, I think my next show is actually here in Phoenix. That's on April 16th. Then on May 7th, I'll be in Las Vegas for a show. And that one's put on by Reefs of Las Vegas, Hedy Fazell. He's a great guy. And then I'll be out in California in Santa Ana for Coral Farmers Market in June. So those are my next 3 upcoming shows. If anybody's going to make it to Reefapalooza, like I mentioned before, I'll be at the Anaheim show in August and the Dallas show in October. And those are always a blast. You really get to see a ton. Even if you're not looking to buy things, it's so much fun to go out to these shows and just see the amazing corals. It's really a cool experience. So if you haven't done one, if one of these is going to be in your hometown, definitely try to make it out. They're a lot of fun. And I just want to thank you, Keith, for having me on again, and talking to you for this length of time has kind of taken my mind off of the things that have happened today. So I actually feel a lot better. I'm able to smile now. So,
dude, I'll tell you, man, when you, like I said, when you called me like 20 minutes before the stream, I thought you were, you know, basically your mindset, I was like, this show's not happening. He can't do the show. And, I know, so I appreciate you doing the show.
Yeah, I wanted to check in with you because I didn't want to be Debbie Downer or something like that, and just come on and with a towel crying, or something like that. But no, I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate everybody who tuned in today, and keep tuning in because Keith's got a great show, has a lot of great guests.
Thanks, Bill. One last rapid fire question from Jake. I think you answered this question. What coral is highest on your wish list? If you had to put one at the top.
So specifically on my wish list, I just acquired the Reef Raft Canada Jaw Dropper and Vivid's Insanity. So those were my two that were on my list for. So I have to go back to the drawing board to figure out the next one I want.
Well,
I don't have an actual
there's plenty of choices out there, man. All right, Bill. Well,
certainly.
Bill, man, thanks again for being on the stream, given the circumstances, and love to have you back on again sometime down the road, and perhaps we'll run into one another at a show in the future time.
That sounds good.
So again, thanks to the sponsors, Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine, for supporting the show, and all you folks out there for tuning in. Really, really appreciate it. Want to also remind you that all episodes of Rappin' with ReefBum are now available as podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Stitcher. My next live stream is not going to be a Rappin' with ReefBum. It's actually going to be a live coral show this Saturday at 3 p.m. on YouTube here. And yeah, 20% off of the stuff that I'm selling on my website. So please tune in, and we could even do some Q&A if you want to. I'm going to be drinking a beer, so bring your beverage of choice. Should be a lot of fun. The next Rappin' with ReefBum will be on Thursday, March 31st with Tim Herman, another fellow coral hoarder known as Thurman on Reef to Reef. So Tim was on before, and I'm sure it will be another great chat. Until then, be safe, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, Keith.
Thanks, Bill.